many theorists, Clarke, Fuller, not only art critics, artists, Frank Lloyd Wright, William Robinson, politicians, Gandhi, Mandela, the list goes on and on. And it's because I think he wasn't conclusive necessarily, but he was able to make connections across many spheres of thought, and particularly with regards to aesthetics and ideas of the beautiful. His theories on the nature of the beautiful, typical, vital, the sublime, the picturesque, extend from the work of 18th century aesthetics. Questions of human relationship with nature became a central topic for the 18th century. And it's in the 18th century that you have the founders of modern aesthetics. Aesthetic, a term coined by Baumgarten and developed by thinkers such as Salisbury, Kant. I'm not going into that too far. Important in this context was Ruskin's opposition to those who advocated that aesthetic experience was necessarily limited to a part of human nature. Aesthetic experience could not be neatly shelved into the department of sensation. Later, this would become aestheticism and art as pure aesthetic sensation. Nor could it be shelved into the theoretic world of Platonic perfect forms, ordered and contemplative. It had to be a unity of mind, heart and hand. The philosopher Iris Murdoch, 1992, suggests that a work of art, whether a painting, poem, novel or musical performance, traditionally involves the idea of a sustained, experienced mental synthesis. This synthesis of the complex aspects of human experience is given an accessible and durable form through the self-contained unity or the limited whole of the work of art. Murdoch saw that the traditional concept of the unified work of art was now under attack. This attack had wider and deeper implications, being but part of a general tendency of our age towards the reductive analysis of old and prized unities and deep instinctive beliefs thought to be essential to human nature. She suggests that such conceptions of unity are fundamental to processes of human thought. The idea of a self-contained unity or a limited whole, and a painting is a limited whole, is a fundamental instinctive concept. We see parts of things, we intuit whole things. We seem to know a great deal on the basis of very little. Oblivious of, and this is Murdoch talking now, oblivious of philosophical problems and paucity of evidence, we grasp ourselves as unity, continuous bodies and continuous minds. I thus argue that extending from our intuition of ourselves as ordered, integrated, meaningful and whole beings is a fundamental belief in our capacity to evaluate, classify and create unified systems to explain every aspect of our experience, as well as that which remains beyond our experience. And of course science will talk about so much that is not visible, that is beyond our experience. Philosophers have reflected upon such foundations for our claims to knowledge of the world. Hume, 1739, 40, about then, suggested that some of our most valued conceptions of unity, such as the self, may be no more than illusion, though he had the wisdom to see that if this was so, such illusion was necessary. And this is the point. This is where emptiness begins, so far as I'm concerned, when picturing and illusion are relegated to certain disciplines and important people, and I want to just say one kind of artist, but those people that should be assisting here abdicate their role. So if self is an illusion, it's maybe necessary, and that's from Hume. Hume found by introspection nothing but a passing and shifting kaleidoscope of impressions and ideas, and no separate self. When I look inside myself, all I stumble upon is some perception or other, and nothing but a perception. I never catch myself as a separate entity. And you can sort of think about other thinkers like Rousseau. You can think about the whole course of Impressionism, idea that, you know, nothing is a succession of, life is nothing but a succession of moments as perceived through the senses. All right, you can see the leap in all that kind of thinking. All right, picturing and metaphysical speculation. So I'm saying that illusion and picturing is absolutely fundamental, and every time you speak, every time a philosopher speaks, every time a scientist speaks, they are picturing. Language is about that process, so therefore painting is about that process. Such an illusory unity is central to the role of traditional art, whereby we can look into a painting or through the pages of a novel into another whole world. Our instinctive whole-making tendencies are also answered by metaphysical ideas, which Murdoch sees as related to art and therefore essentially aesthetic. Philosophers, and here she goes, are artists, and metaphysical ideas are aesthetic. They are intended to clarify and connect, and they certainly satisfy deep emotional needs. The image of the unified limited whole is a product of philosophical art and is like a work of art, and a work of art is also like a philosophical proposition. That's my ending on that. Metaphysical ideas are now largely influenced by scientific thinkers. For example, physics portrays causation of the cosmos as an understandable whole in the Big Bang Theory, 1929 Gamow, and in the explanation of what preceded the Big Bang, the anthropic cosmological principle, 1986 Barrow and Tipler, more recently multi-universe versus and string theory ideas. I can go on. Ideas which picture some unified conception of existence, like the ecological conception of Gaia, 1972 Lovelock, may be deeply satisfying in metaphysical thinking. Science subjects such ideas to scrutiny and evidence, they will say. However, the scrutiny and evidence is never enough. If you're going to propose a theory, scrutiny and evidence is never enough. You need to enter into other languages. Both art and philosophy have traditionally been concerned with the nature, status and authority of these limited wholes, which clarify and connect the complex parts of experience. All difficult concepts, such as evolution, have to be pictured, and the picture as a fundamental function of language is a unified and limited whole. Great painters, poets and philosophers construct pictures, stories, as powerful images or analogies of an infinitely complex and ultimately abstract reality. How else do we grasp or visualise any totality or value within the continual flux of existence? All right. The aesthetic dimension is such a totality which, as art constructs images of pictures, of complex and qualitative reality within a limited whole. According to Murdoch, 1992, part of the process of modernist deconstruction is the removal of pictures. But she also asks whether this is just really a case of the substitution of one picture for another. I would suggest, in painterly terms, the painterly, harmonious picture of the natural world or the blank canvas of nihilism. You've got a choice. Within this context, art becomes a self-referential language wherein the subject of a painting becomes the painting process itself and not a transcendent reality which points beyond the linguistic medium of paint on canvas. Such a philosophy is taken up by artists who believe that they can push art to its limits and even to extinction. Modernist painting was to pursue a progressive reductionism and a denial of the role of art as transcendent object. Other things within that section that I'm only going to touch on because I want to get on to something else were various misconceptions that were also part and parcel, I think, of the difficulties. I mean, that there are so many causes to what I see as the relinquishment of a special preserve that in a very short paper that can't possibly be covered. Certainly, I think, you know, that perennial debate between the Platonic eternal versus the fleeting appearances of sensation and the discrediting of art. You know, the idea that perfect forms and purified emotions have an existence outside of their corporeal form. You know, that's something I'm going to talk about here. Also, you know, the thing that Gombrich covered so brilliantly, the misdiagnosis of what is the representational. You know, I think when artists talk about the representational and the abstract, it's territory which is very, very complex. Certainly Gombrich suggested that, you know, the whole notion of the representational art as mimesis, the fundamental misconception of art as an imitational copying of reality, it still pervades the art world. Of course, the whole photographic virtual revolution, that notion that in photography, that in a virtual world, we can free visual imagery from human error. We must free imagery from human error. And it's pervasive. That's why so many artists who are gaining accolades do their best, I suppose, to look as photographic as possible. And I think that's to do with a general illiteracy, though, that because artists had relinquished this preserved graphic, what I call graphic language or painterly language, it has to be learnt. And if it's not there at a high quality, it's not going to be understood. Okay, so all those things, misconception of the representational, this whole huge development that is part of the virtual digital revolution, which I won't talk about here. What I need to say, and I don't know, I'll probably have to finish soon before I bore you to death, is that I want to talk about, already you see that I'm searching beyond my sphere, but I was looking for dimensions of understanding. I was also trying to establish parallels between various theoretical, practical frameworks, cross-referencing ideas, looking for a litmus test, I guess, of the strength of various abstract conceptions of nature, because that's important. Because if you are talking about nature through your language, what is your understanding of nature? You know, but it's not just a matter of going out there and looking at scenery, of course. It's as Ruskin understood, as Turner understood. All great painters most certainly are usually intellectually engaged with the understanding of their time. So, the scientific aesthetic and metaphysical response to nature. Listen carefully to the words of the great scientists, and you find artful use of metaphorical language. Drawn from the rich sources of other disciplines, such metaphors assist in framing a hypothesis. Before Gaia was the scientific hypothesis, the planetary living system, she was a Greek earth goddess. Lovelock's 1988 theory describes the interdependence of all natural phenomena, living and non-living, in an interaction of atmosphere, oceans, climate, Earth's crust, and living organisms using the energy of the sun. Very beautiful. Lovelock's idea embraces a metaphysical and aesthetic view of scientific theory as, in his words, a way to view the Earth, ourselves, and our relationships with living things. And this is what, you know, evolutionary theory and a whole lot of thinking in process theory and so on, this is the sort of expression that is necessary in theorising. It doesn't mean to say, in scientific theory, both literary and numerical systems of language, for example, there are different languages, may describe conceptions of nature and support each other. Earth Gaia is a living system of which we are a part, and in terms of nature's measurable parts, for example, the proportion of oxygen in Earth's atmosphere equals 21%. So the different languages can be supportive of each other. All artists know that however nebulous a great painting like Turner's is, that it has behind it an enormous understanding of structure. The same sort of, shall we say, well, it's not the same sort of calculation as mathematics, but it is theoretical. It is removed from sensation, and so it can be compared. Alright, the concept of nature as a pattern of relationships grows out of earlier ideas all the way back. You know, you look at Aristotle looking at nature as a pattern of relationships, Darwin's evolutionary theory, Gaia theory, and so it continues. Working within a limitation, the landscape of the possible. There are distinct advantages of working within a limitation, and then we're thinking outside of the framework and pushing the boundaries as far as possible. At least that appears to be the case when you're looking at great paintings. Languages, all languages are limited, according to the physicists Heisenberg, Bohr, Capra. Scientists had difficulty translating the findings of quantum physics in established systems of logic and language. Heisenberg. The problems of language here are really serious. We wish to speak in some way about the structure of atoms, but we cannot speak about atoms in ordinary language. Bohr, uncertainty principle, was impressed with the parallels he saw between the complementarity of quantum theory and the dynamic relationship of polar opposites in ancient Chinese Taoism. The dynamic relationship between void and matter. He actually found it necessary to step outside of his discipline to look for a possible language to explain what he saw as this incredible dualism when they looked at subatomic particles and the nature of light and electromagnetic radiation. Okay. So, an image. So, void. Think about notions of void. In the case of Taoism, the idea of a dynamic void. A void which is not just space, is not just emptiness, but is full of, I mean, you might want to use a word like spirit, but in effect the void in that sort of thinking is does not exclude matter, if you like. I won't go into that any further. Just the necessity of, shall we say, stepping outside of our language sometimes. So the strength and limitation, exploring beyond the mindset of our profession. Knowledge in modern times is represented by the professions, each of which analyse the world through a particular set of abstractions and a particular methodology. The emphasis on certain abstract formulations of thought to the exclusion of others embodies both strength and limitation. So, never worry that you're working within a limitation. When I was talking to Jacques, I said something to him about, you know, the way artists appear to lack confidence, and he says, yes, I've always wondered about that. And I said, well, you know, how do you deal with sort of the uncertainty principle? He says, well, look, and he said, well, one of the things that scientists do is they simply are quite satisfied to work from one limitation to another. In other words, one certainty to another, without thinking that one has to, you know, solve a whole lot of problems. So every time you create a painting, you are working within a set of you're selecting and you're working with a set and limited parameter. Doesn't mean to say that by limited I mean limitation. Okay, so I'm saying it's both strength and limitation. Methods practiced by each profession evolve according to historical and cultural context and relation to particular abstract ideas. The following analysis has special relevance for landscape painting. Okay. Right, there's one. You know, that'll do. You know there's a series of them, everyone should. The methodology of 19th century Impressionist painting emphasised the concrete apprehension. What do I mean by that? I'm kind of pulling out of, you know, bigger arguments, so sometimes, you know, these terms might not mean anything. What I mean by that is the importance of the obvious earthy, real contact with nature. So, the methodology of 19th century Impressionist painting emphasised the concrete apprehension of nature through adding strength to the tradition of plein air painting. An Impressionist painting was, if possible, now every time you say something, and painters know, because it's your discipline, that none of these things are exactly true. And impressionist painting was, if possible, done on the spot in the landscape as a record of optical sensation, though often problems were subsequently thrashed out in the studio. Alright? I mean, how many times do you work in the landscape and then bring it back and then thrash it around? Many, many, many times. How many times do you then take it back out into the landscape again? Well, that becomes more difficult. Alright, Impressionism's result. But if I can sort of, and if you were going to talk about quantum theory or anything else, this is the problem of language. You know, there's always a problem. So, Impressionism's resolve to find a new way of painting in order to express the truth and beauty of visual sensation focused attention on the physical world. I should say more attention on the physical world. Not all attention, just more attention. In so doing, Impressionism made its great contribution to our capacity to see the world, and in the words of Clarke, enlarged our range of vision. He said, every day we pause with joy before some effect of light which we should otherwise have passed without notice. A lot of us would say, oh, rubbish, you know, human beings have always been able to walk into a landscape and appreciate it. But, you know, Clarke would also say that people didn't even bother going into the mountains and contemplating them until the 18th century. And if you're a farmer and you're struggling for survival, why you don't have the leisure and you do not have the comfort to go walk about and contemplate the aesthetic qualities of things. However, I think he's right. I think because visual sensation is an immediate thing, because this part of our learning is so fundamental. We look at a painting, it's really nothing like nature, so far as I'm concerned. Certainly in a photographic sense, it's nothing like nature. But in terms of what nature is, yes, it is really like nature. Alright? And this is something to ponder. The focus of Impressionism on a world of physical sensations was thus a source of strength but also limitation. For such a focus, by its very nature, must exclude something, and this is at risk, and that something was a broader field of imaginative association. Now I say a broader field, but to say it wasn't imaginative association and that it was only, you know, my is an eye, but my God, what an eye. Funk. Alright? It's all imaginative. The whole lot of it. It's an abstraction. So, where was I? Before I got excited. However, painting, like all language, is an imaginative construction. And the leading proponents developed techniques which, while responding to sensation, also convey an idea of nature. Monet's series of haystacks suggests the uniqueness of each atmospheric moment, while interdependent and interconnected with other moments conditioned by the elements over time. And we know this because he painted haystack after haystack after haystack, morning, afternoon, night. And so he wanted the relationships, the continuum, the time continuum. The imaginative invention of the interplay of patches of coloured pigments to suggest vibrancy of light and shadow as atmospheric flux was so convincing a pictorial metaphor as to appeal, and I'm going to put a big line here, in time, to the receptive viewer as visual truth. Because it certainly did not look like visual truth to the outsider at first. And here's the other problem, that the artist that really is going into the landscape and really is developing a graphic response and really is thinking must be aware that what they produce will be unfamiliar. Now this is not an excuse for all those people that produce nonsense and say you don't understand it. Well, there's a whole history of people not comprehending it, so it doesn't mean it's not great art. You know what I'm talking about. But there is always this lapse, except for the practitioners involved, in terms of being able to appreciate the visual truth of something which, like a scientific proposition or a mathematical proposition, has to be learnt. The methodologies of important scientific theories may also be examined in this way. The set of abstract formulations which underpin the mechanistic scientific paradigm which shaped, I don't like that word, but anyway, which shaped scientific thought from the 17th century have also proven to be both a source of strength and limitation. In 19th century developments in Impressionist landscape painting enlarged our range of vision, they were Dark's words, and thereby our aesthetic appreciation of the natural world, no small feat. Then, according to scientists, our changing conceptions of nature since the 17th century have largely been derived from scientific thought, and the mechanistic theory of nature has been the dominant conception until recent times, and it's still dominant in some quarters, certainly in all of the work that gives us genetic engineering. Galileo, Newton, Descartes, etc., constructed a vision of the material universe, a mechanistic and materialistic theory of nature which, according to Whitehead 1946, proposes the ultimate fact of an irreducible matter of material spread throughout space in a flux of configurations. In itself, such a material is senseless, valueless, purposeless. This is Whitehead. Now, I won't go for too long here, but the mechanistic concept, according to Whitehead and others, confined understanding of the natural world to, in Whitehead's words, certain types of facts abstracted from the complete circumstances in which they occur. Well, isn't that what we always do? All right? So this is not to say that the mechanistic theory is not useful. It's simply that it will have certain limitations, the same as everything that we do. The inheritance of mechanistic theory is the success of reductionist ideas in modern science, for example, the explanation of an organism by its cell chemistry, its smallest essential parts, has laid foundation for modern biology and the recent advances in stem cell research and genetic engineering. However, limitations to this reductionist method are revealed when you wish to understand the whole organism. An understanding of an organism requires an understanding of both the full relationship of its parts and its full environmental relationship, that is, its ecology. The limiting assumption of the mechanistic methodology has proven to be both strength and weakness. So the only reason I'm looking at these things is to, why? Why? Only because I want to see what my own discipline is doing, try to see as a layman what other disciplines are doing. And of course, philosophers, according to Whitehead, their duty is to harmonise thinking from different spheres of thought. That's his view. In a way, I think artists as philosophers are doing the same thing. Of course, they're harmonising. If they are really thinking and if they are really taking what they do seriously, as Murdoch said, it's a similar sort of process. Now, I'm just coming to something important, then I'll better stop. I must be going way over time, am I? No? Okay. According to Whitehead, one way of testing abstract ideas, and this is something that I thought comes very, very close to what we do, is through dispassionate observation. I don't think there's such a thing. By means of the bodily senses, it's passionate observation quite a lot, while realising that the scientist tries to be dispassionate and the artist also at times tries to be dispassionate too. Let's face it, you stand back from your painting after a glass of wine, you think it's bloody good, and then the next day you try to be dispassionate about it and you realise it's no good at all. Okay, so anyway, back to that. So one way of testing abstract ideas is through dispassionate observation.